the Honourable Justice Christine French. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank
you. Great to be here with you. It's a cool place, and as I was just saying, I've always wondered whether you read all these books. Have you read them all yourself?
Oh yes, absolutely. No, we would only look at those books if someone cited a case
right.
that's published in those volumes.
Okay, fantastic. So UMFA is all about inspiring people to achieve extraordinary things. So who and what during your life and career has inspired you?
I would say my parents, first and foremost, in particular my father, who was a lawyer himself, and he instilled in all of us a love for the law and a belief in justice and a belief that if you went to the courts of New Zealand you would get justice.
Yeah. And that was it your brothers as well? So you were one time working at a firm where you had, your father, two brothers and several other family members. So what was that like?
Most people think it would be ghastly, but I always say, well, where else could you start arguing with the senior partner without getting into trouble?
Yeah. No.
But it was actually great, a very, very supportive environment. And at the same time, you have autonomy because you have your own clients.
Yeah.
And the other benefit was that I was never really subject to budgetary constraints in terms of I could work for as long as I liked on a particular case without worrying too much about the firm's budget for fees, etc.
Yeah. And did you all specialise in similar areas as well, or were you kind of working across different fields?
Different fields, but mainly court work.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine with that you've like finished work, but you'd never really finish. You'd always be discussing what's happening around the table.
Lots of arguments.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I guess, as I say, you obviously, as you said before, you obviously come from a very, very legal background. So growing up, did you always want to be a lawyer and one day a judge?
Well, actually, my favourite subjects at school were languages.
Okay.
So I had sort of had dreams of being an interpreter at the United Nations, perhaps.
Okay.
But as time went by, probably tending more and more towards law. Because if you see someone who really loves what they're doing, then you tend to be attracted to that as well.
Yeah. So you graduated from the University of Otago in 1981 with a Bachelor of Laws, and then on to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar. I guess firstly, congratulations on that, because that's a huge achievement as a young person in general. So how'd you go about, was that quite a big process of applying for that and everything, for the Rhodes Scholarship?
Well, actually it was again my father who encouraged me to apply. It was something I would never have thought of doing, which I think just goes to show that you should always take every opportunity. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Absolutely. And when looking over your time, especially at Otago, what were some of the key lessons that you think you learned around, I guess, law or life in general that you think placed you really well for the future in terms of being a lawyer and later a judge?
Well, Otago, of course, has the huge advantage of being a campus, a true campus university, and so there's wonderful friendships made. In terms of development as a lawyer, I think the two things that really stand out for me from Otago, first of all, learning to write clearly and communicate clearly in short, simple sentences. And the second thing would be legal analysis in terms of close textual analysis, close reading of case law, not being content with just a superficial skim read, but really closely analysing it.
Yeah. So it was a good school to go to. Have you went to Otago?
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And I presume you've still got lots of friends who went there as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And law's obviously a very competitive sort of field to get into, particularly in those early days when you're sort of trying to go from first year to second year and so on. So from your experience, what would be your advice for young people out there studying law who are trying to kind of get through it? Is there any secrets you would pass on?
I think hard work is probably the key one.
Yeah.
But again, the writing skills and the analytical tools.
Okay.
But if they really develop a love for the law, they'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah. So you always I guess you just felt like you were studying stuff you enjoyed.
Exactly. So it wasn't a hard grind.
Okay. Yeah, and tell me a bit more about the time in Oxford a bit later on. What was that like?
Amazing. I was very, very lucky to get that opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
The history, the traditions.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It was pretty challenging, was it?
Yeah, it was. It was very challenging.
Yeah.
And I've always thought I'm a bit of a workaholic, but the other graduate students there far surpassed me. I was quite idle in comparison.
Yeah, and after that, you had obviously done your Bachelor of Laws at Otago, and then What was the degree at Oxford? Sorry?
It's called a BCL, Bachelor of Civil Law.
Okay, Bachelor of Civil Law. So you've done, how many years in total was it that you were studying it?
I suppose it was getting close to 7.
Okay, so did you consider, I guess, staying in academia and becoming a lecturer in that sort of field?
I certainly did, but I felt that my passion was really for dealing more with actual cases and people.
Yeah, okay. So then back to New Zealand, and you went back to Invercargill. I presume, I was thinking this morning, after doing that Rhodes Scholarship and getting you a degree from Otago, you'd had so many opportunities. So why did you decide to go back to the sort of small town as opposed to come and work for one of the big firms up in Auckland? Or?
Probably because of family and friends. But as I've often said, I came to develop quite a complex because people were always telling me I needed to leave Invercargill if I wanted to do any good.
Right, okay.
And I think if my career demonstrates anything, it is that coming from the provinces doesn't have to be a disadvantage.
No, exactly. Yeah. And then back to Invercargill, and at French Burt Partners in 84 and becoming a partner yourself in 88. So I guess what was it like after all those years of studying, finally getting into the field? I mean, was it totally different to what you expected at all? Was it kind of similar? Or?
Well, having sort of been in a family where 3 people were practicing law, I was reasonably familiar with what happens in a law firm, but there was still lots of challenges, and it's nerve-wracking. Your first appearance in court is pretty tough.
Okay.
You stand up not knowing what you're going to say or when to say it.
What would you say were some of the biggest challenges in those early days?
I think being prepared, knowing the law, knowing the facts of a case. Preparation is everything, really.
Right. So how long would you spend preparing for your first day in court, for example?
Probably a very long time, because you get more efficient as time goes by.
Okay, yeah.
But I think one big lesson I learnt was there was an opportunity to go to the Privy Council, which was a case that started off in Invercargill that I had appeared on in the High Court.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were saying you need to employ an English QC to appear in the Privy Council. But I asked one of the judges here, Justice Tipping, and he gave me very good advice. That's probably some of the best advice I've ever received, and that was to just back yourself.
Right.
Because you know more, he said, about the case than anyone else will, and you'll also care more than anybody else.
Yeah. Okay, and just talking about, I guess, that caring and I guess the emotional aspect of it all, I can imagine when you're working with a client who you fully believe yourself is innocent and there might be a bit of doubt around that. I mean, is it challenging trying to convince people to kind of, I guess when there is so much emotion involved, convince people to kind of see your point of view sometimes? I mean, what are the lessons and advice, I guess, you'd pass on around that sort of thing?
Well, ultimately you are the client's mouthpiece, subject to your duties to the court. But I did find, fortunately, that most clients followed my advice. If you talk things through with people, they generally can see reason.
Right, okay.
But ultimately it's their case and it's their instructions.
Yeah. And when you first start working with a client, do you feel you're obliged to work out yourself whether they're guilty or innocent, or do you just kind of take what they've said and go with that?
Well, the role of the lawyer is to represent the person, and we operate in a legal system where the onus of proof is on the prosecution to prove the case. Yeah. So the lawyer will never know for certain whether someone is guilty or not, but their task is to test the prosecution case. What you must not do is put your client into the witness box to tell what you know to be lies, if you do in fact know that.
Right, yeah.
So you have ethical duties.
Okay.
But it's not for the lawyer to judge the client.
Yeah. You just kind of take their word for it and then build a case around what they're saying is...
Well, yes, but of course you are also obliged to point out to the client the strength of the prosecution case and the likelihood of being acquitted.
Yeah. Okay. And what were some of the key lessons you took from your time as a lawyer when you were admitted to the High Court and later the Court of Appeal? What were some of the key similarities or lessons you took over to your new roles?
I think the legal analysis is the same, and the writing skills. judges have to deliver judgments all the time, and they've got to be understood not only by the parties and lawyers but also by the general public who read them, and the Court of Appeal or the other appellate court that might be deciding whether you've made a mistake or not.
Yeah, and was it challenging? I mean, I guess when you were practicing law, you were focusing on several areas, but when you were in the High Court, you're sort of judging cases maybe in like murder trials and stuff that you haven't personally practiced in before. What was that like?
That's a huge challenge, so you're really moving outside your comfort zone.
Okay.
You would hope that the skills are transferable, that there are some generic skills, but there are steep learning curves. For example, criminal jury trials, I'd only personally been counsel in 3 before my appointment as a judge.
Okay.
So that was obviously something that was concerning me as to how I'd be able to manage the trials, but had excellent counsel, and as again preparation.
Yeah. And what do you do to prepare? Yeah. What did you do to prepare for that? Was there a lot of reading involved and upskilling, or?
Well, you'd be reasonably familiar with the background to the case, the Crown allegations, and you would make sure that you were familiar as much as you could be with court procedure. Yeah. And again, always ask. That's one of my key messages, I guess, is that people should never be afraid to ask.
Okay.
And I was very lucky when I was appointed to the High Court. One of the other judges was appointed a mentor.
Okay.
Which is a system they have.
That'd
and the
be
same
helpful.
when I was in practice. You should never be afraid to ask for help.
Okay.
It's one great thing about the legal profession is that there'll always be someone who will help you.
Yeah. And just on that point, when you were appointed to the High Court, first South Island woman ever to receive that honour, which is huge, and congratulations again. That's very, 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 very cool. What was that always the dream for you? Like when you were practicing law and you were in university, were you thinking one day I want to be a judge, or did you maybe see yourself staying and practicing law as a lawyer for longer?
I think I would have thought it would be good to perhaps to be appointed.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that it was a driving ambition. But if I was lucky enough to be appointed, then that would be wonderful.
Yeah. And was it hard, I guess, being the judge as opposed to almost fighting the battles as such? Was the change in mindset quite hard to get used to?
You have to be careful not to step into the fray. It is a bit tempting. Well, another big difference is the fact that when you deliver a judgment as a judge, you never hear anything more about what happened to the parties, how that judgment affected their lives, what happened next. Whereas, of course, as a lawyer, you're fully involved in the post-judgment process, and that is something that's quite hard to get used to.
Yeah. And today, I mean, what would you say is some of the other greatest challenges in the Court of Appeal versus the High Court? Again, it's another huge sort of step. What are some of the greatest challenges with that?
I guess the volumes of cases and the amount of reading that we have to do before the hearings, it's vast.
Okay, so you'll read back across that case, the cases in the past, and sort of see why it's in the Court of Appeal in the first place and all that sort of stuff.
Well, yes, you have to read assuming, depending on the type of appeal that it is, you may have to read the entire transcript of evidence and the submissions that are being made and look at all the documents that were produced at the hearing. And so you might hear 3 appeals or 4 appeals in a week, sometimes 12 appeals in a busy criminal divisional list. So that is a lot of reading. Yeah.
And would you go back and sort of talk to witnesses and that kind of thing?
No.
You don't do that?
No, it's all on the record.
Okay.
Sometimes if a party wants to have further evidence called, they have to apply for leave, and that's not very common at all.
Right. And just coming back to that emotional angle one more time, I guess when you're in the High Court and you're a judge there, is it hard for you as the judge sometimes I can imagine you would have seen some probably quite gruesome cases, to kind of remove that, you sort of see it over so many weeks, and surely it must be hard to become quite, I don't know the word I'm looking for, almost impartial or quite sort of emotionless when you're delivering your verdict and so on, and doing your sentencing and so on. Was that a challenge, or are there clear guidelines that you follow, or how does that work?
Well, you have to remain professional at all times.
Yeah.
But I've seen juries who have no legal training and sometimes in court for the very first time in their lives, they are able to remain very professional.
Okay.
But on the other hand, you don't want judges to be completely detached. We have to be compassionate as well.
Right.
But ultimately, we have to apply the law.
Yeah. And do you think the way the system works today is the best way to structure it, with juries and then judges doing the sentencing, or do you think that, I guess maybe would you think that judges, if they were sort of delivering the verdict as well, would that be a better way of structuring it? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I personally, and this is just speaking my personal view, I have great faith in the jury system.
Okay.
The juries that I've worked with always impressed me with their approach to the task.
Okay.
Extremely diligent, careful, and very astute.
Yeah.
So I have great confidence in the jury system. Obviously, there'll be some cases, for example, complicated fraud cases where a judge alone may be more appropriate, and that happens.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So we've just got a few quick fire questions to finish off. In summary, what would your top sort of 2 or 3 bits of advice be for a young person wanting to become a lawyer and later a judge?
Well, first of all, I think it's a great career, wonderful job, huge variety, intellectually challenging, and extremely worthwhile, making a difference.
Yeah.
So I would encourage anyone who is thinking about being a lawyer to do so. It's a fabulous job.
Okay. So are there any mistakes that you see lawyers making, sort of young lawyers coming through, where lots of them make the same mistake that you kind of notice now with your experience and think that maybe they should know about that?
I think there is one common fault that we're all guilty of, and that's probably being a bit verbose or raising too many issues.
Right.
Most cases actually turn on just a few points.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to be a bit more incisive.
Yeah. Okay, and what do you reckon the 16-year-old Christine French would think of who you've become today?
I think she'd be astounded that I was in the Court of Appeal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Any advice you want to give her?
I'd say don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of stepping outside your comfort zone and taking on new challenges.
Yeah, fantastic. And what's the truth that you believe to be true that not many people agree with you on? Is there anything that springs to mind?
Probably that Southland is the best rugby province.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And just finally, before we finish off, what quality of mind or state of mind do you think's best served you in your success? For example, some people have said hunger or desire or resilience, or what for you has been that quality of mind that you think's served you well?
Probably perseverance.
Right. Okay, so just not giving up?
Well, working hard, because I have had to work hard.
Yeah. Okay, and is that the thing you would say to people, is like, it's a great job, but it's not easy, you've got to really work hard?
Well, you work hard, but if you love the work, then it's I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's very enjoyable.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. So to finish off, Justice French, can you please look down this camera here and tell us, in summary, what are your wise words for the people of New Zealand?
I would say be proud of where you come from, have a passion for what you do, compassionate to others, and probably above all, integrity.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Cheers. That was fantastic. Thank you.